So we recently, our last Into the Abyss, this is one of those like side conversations. Our last Into the Abyss, we talked about abandoned places that we like to go to. And we were just talking about Chuck's video game review about, what was it called, Bloodborne?
Bloodborne, yep.
Bloodborne. And I mentioned to him, man, that really sounds like Silent Hill. And I was talking about how we're going to mention that in our contemporary classics. And Tom was mentioning, it's a good thing you guys actually went there before Graffiti Highway. So those of you guys that don't know, if you've seen the Silent Hill movies, or if you're uber nerds, if you've read the novella by Dean Koontz called Strange Highways, this is all based on the reality of Centralia, PA. Tom, you're our history expert, so why don't you fill us in on the history of Centralia, PA?
Sure. Well, some of you may know that Pennsylvania has always been a very big coal mining state. So you will actually have some towns eventually evolve around with coal mines as the predominant business. So Centralia, Pennsylvania, it's how far away is it from here, Kevin? I'd say about 2 hours.
Yeah, 2.5 hours at the most. Yeah, it wasn't that long.
Yeah, so mid Pennsylvania. In the 1970s, they were getting prepared. That was for the 4th of July. I'm a little bit shaky on some of the details. I don't know if they were preparing for a holiday or not, but the fire department set a controlled fire in the dump to try to clean part of it up.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, the coal mine caught fire from this controlled fire. And unfortunately, there's enough coal down there to burn for probably a couple hundred more years. So the government had to step in because it got to the point where you had sinkholes opening up and roads and yards. If you stood too long on certain roads, the rubber of your shoes would start to melt. So it got to the point where the government, they didn't declare eminent domain at the moment. They were buying up people's houses to move away. They basically said, look, this town has to close down. But some hardcore people wanted to remain there. So the rule was quite simple. They could, but you had these buildings being torn down, and they rerouted the highway and all that. So if you ever go there today, which I guess they kind of frown upon, there's only a few buildings left. Most notably, is the Ukrainian church.
Yeah, so I'll fill that in. You can keep doing the history, then I'll fill in, because we actually went there. So
yeah, I mean, because in the 1970s, we actually saw a few what we consider environmental disasters. 3 Mile Island accident as well. And it just kind of showed how mankind can screw up pretty bad when it comes to their environment.
So for the hardcore horror fans, Centralia, or what's left of Centralia, as Tom said, they closed the town down. They diverted the highway. There were some people who refused to move, and they were actually still living there through the 80s, through the 90s, up until now.
I've seen the homes. Yeah, you mentioned the Graffiti Highway. I've actually never seen the Graffiti Highway, but I have driven through Centralia.
Yeah.
Yes, there's just lots of grass and trees and abandoned places, and then there's this occasional house here and there.
Okay, yeah, so it's become kind of a horror mecca. Most people are aware that Silent Hill, the video game, and then the movie, were loosely based on Centralia. The idea that a coal mining town, a fire spread to the coal mines, and then and I'm doing a very loose paraphrase of both the video games and the movies, something happened with a coal mine fire that unleashed the fires of hell. Okay, but if you're an uber horror geek, you know that long before Silent Hill, Dean Koontz, who is a native of Pennsylvania, wrote a novella called Strange Highways, where a character named Joey Shannon is going back to his small mining town after his father has passed away, and he's lived a life of, like, his life didn't pan out the way he wanted it to. He wishes he could redo it, and he ends up having this fantastical adventure against his demon-possessed brother, because his brother went off and did all the things that Joey wanted to do. But come to find out, the reason why is because of sometime Joey's brother PJ sold a soul to the devil. They have a confrontation in a town where the coal mine is burning and everyone has moved out, which is basically Centralia. So that actually precedes Silent Hill. Over the years, because of that, it's become kind of a horror writer mecca, where people will go to Centralia, and like you said, Chuck, there were buildings that were still standing for the longest time. You could walk through and see them, and there was also a section of the highway that has been termed Graffiti Highway. Now, and I'll throw some pictures up there. We were fortunate enough, Madison, my daughter and I were fortunate enough this past late August, early fall, to meet up with horror writers Bob Ford, Kelly Owen, Wesley Soudard, and Wesley's wife Katie. And we met up at Centralia and checked it out. And it was cool. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. It would have been cooler if I could have done it a couple years ago, though. Because for one thing, all the buildings in Centralia are mostly gone. You can drive around the side streets, and it is kind of creepy because you can see the foundations where the buildings used to be in the houses, and you can actually see, like, front porch steps. All those buildings are gone. Now, the church is still there. And I believe that church is the church. It's the church in the first movie. That church is loosely based, and I'll put up a picture of my daughter and I posing in front of this church. So that church was still there, and that was kind of cool. Graffiti Highway is still there, but from what I understand, early on, Graffiti Highway was super creepy. Some of the cracks in the pavement were still venting steam. And all of the graffiti was really apocalyptic, like occult symbology, and like 666 and all this occult pagan symbols. At some point, and it's funny, because I wonder if the township down there did this on purpose. At some point, they actually said, "Come to Graffiti Highway and add your own graffiti." So you almost wonder if they didn't like all that occult symbology there, and so by the time we got there, the whole highway was covered with all sorts of graffiti. I mean, it's actually kind of cool, but apparently not as creepy as it used to be. Tom is right. They recently announced that they are going to plow under Graffiti Highway, and they are no longer going to allow people to go there. And unfortunately, this is another one of those cases of, this is why we can't have nice things. Because when we were there, it was very apparent as to why they were doing that. When we were there, unfortunately, there were at least 40 other people there. 40 other people hiking, but also people roaring their four-wheelers up and down. People roaring their trucks up and down. People who were walking all over the cemeteries. We went to one cemetery and took some pictures, and it was really cool. We wanted to go to another cemetery, and the county police showed up and told us we couldn't go. So it's obviously now it's got to the point where it's too much of a attraction. So now, unfortunately, they said they're going to be plowing under. I'm just happy we got a chance to go there, which again, further motivating me that at some point when all this COVID stuff is all over, when I'm done with my surgery, Into the Abyss is going to go on the road and do some urban exploring.
While we're at it, because I like the whole mankind screws up and let's inspire horror stories. Have you ever heard of the Gates of Hell?
I know the name rings a bell, yes.
And it's one of the breakaway Soviet republics, Turkmenistan, I believe. And back in 1971, Soviet engineers, miners, it was a natural gas mine, and they're like, okay, we'll just set it on fire and it'll burn away. And it's been burning ever since. You ever look it up? It seriously looks like, you can't really see it here. It looks like you're going into hell. It's not like Centralia. It looks like you're going down into hell itself, and it's been burning ever since 1971.
Just remember, kids. Humans, we build stuff, we blow stuff up.
Now, actually, you mentioned Silent Hill. Actually, I can kind of give quick synopsis on that. So my experience with Silent Hill is I played the first one a little bit. Second one I really dove into, and I played that one back when my wife was, early on dating me. And so she's like, "Oh yeah, I just want to hang out with you." She watched me play Silent Hill 2, or parts of it, and she had nightmares for days. She's like, "I'm not watching you play anymore." But in Silent Hill 2 and 3 are kind of considered like the peak of the series. But it's a great concept, and I read an article, someone broke it down. No one actually knows completely what's going on. You can have your different interpretations of it. That's one of the cool things with Silent Hill. The theory might be completely wrong because Silent Hill never gets into what's actually going on there. But I think it's the best theory to explain the universe. And the idea is Silent Hill is really something that draws people back in for something they regret. They may have a physical connection to the town that's there, but it's really this emotional and spiritual brokenness that draws them back in. So the people that are coming back in, Silent Hill 2, for example, the man lost his wife, and his regret over that is what actually draws him back to Silent Hill. And the theory states that really there probably is a town that exists that's normal, and that's what you'd seen before, but it's really the fog roll. If you watch the Silent Hill movie, the fog rolls in. It's really this fog universe where you start to have more the emotional and spiritual aspects of it. Only the person who's there, or people who are also dealing with regret, actually see that version of Silent Hill. And it's a cool theory where everything that they are bothered by, their trauma, is what creates the visions of the monsters. So, for example, the very famous nurse monsters that's in the Silent Hill movie, it's in the Silent Hill game series. It has to do with the fact that the guy dealt with watching his wife die from cancer. I think it was cancer for months and months. And so the nurses were a part of that. So when you see the nurses in Silent Hill, it's really his personal trauma. And there's hints that what everyone else experiences is a completely different trauma, different monsters that's there, and that's what they're seeing in Silent Hill. So it's really this well of all the trauma and the regrets that people have that draws them back in and just tears them apart. So it's a really cool concept. I'd love to see more stories done with that idea.
I've heard that, I don't know if it's gotten past the development stage, but I heard the third movie. So Silent Hill 1 and 2 are also notable in the fact that Sean Bean actually doesn't die in those movies. Because Sean Bean dies in every movie except for in these two. And at the end of Silent Hill 2, which wasn't that great of a movie, he doesn't leave Silent Hill because he says he has to go look for his wife, Rose. And I've heard that the ideas for Silent Hill 3 would be more loyal to the video game and focus on him searching for his wife. So,
yeah, be cool.
Anyway,
yeah,
there you have it.